name is Professor Robert Geyer. I'm the head of the Department of Politics, Philosophy and Religion at Lancaster University and an associate consultant for the Hope Street Center in Liverpool. I'm an expert on complexity in public policy and have been studying it for the last 10 years and have written numerous books and articles on the topic. In this brief film, I'll be introducing you to the theory, concept, and tools of complexity, and I will be arguing that this framework offers a radical rethink of UK public policy and even, more practically, enables you to do more with less in the current environment of austerity and change. Before we go on to explore complexity and some of its tools and concepts, we need to step back and look at the key aspects of UK public policy in the 20th century and one of its key weaknesses in the 21st. As is well known, during the 20th century, and particularly after World War II, UK public policy was based on a strong centralist, rationalist, and hierarchical structure. This structure was called the Westminster model, based on central government control, the civil sector application, and local actor implementation. Throughout much of the period, the Westminster model was held up as an ideal for other countries to follow, and deservedly so. It created a reasonable balance between the older types of government systems that had problems of corruption and disorder against the overbearing and domineering communist systems that allowed for no flexibility within their systems. However, with the growth of professionalization, computerization, and the ability to store and manipulate large amounts of data, it became increasingly easy for UK public policy to move in this centralist and hierarchical direction. Particularly under the Conservatives in the 1980s and 90s, they implemented something called New Public Management. Under New Labour in the 1990s and 2000, this became evidence-based policymaking with its emphasis on targeting and audit cultures. Put simply, for modern policy actors, more evidence required more information. More information required more targets required more audits, and the process was never ending. This led to the massive growth of large auditing and targeting institutions within UK public policy for the last 20 years, as well as a massive increase in the total number of targets that local actors were responsible for. An example of just how far this system had gotten out of control was made clear to me when I was interviewing a CEO of a medium-sized hospital in the Northwest. The CEO, when I asked the question, how many targets are you responsible for on a daily basis? He responded that, over 300. I said, how on earth do you manage to deal with 300 separate targets? He said, well, basically, we pay attention to the key 10 to 15 targets and try not to focus too much on the other targets unless we have to, if there's a crisis or what have you. Clearly, there were obvious weaknesses with this policy approach, and these weaknesses were well known to policy actors and academics. This type of targeting and audit culture tended to generate wasteful, over-directed, and controlling policy strategies. For example, local policy actors who recognized that their jobs and the survival of their institutions was linked to these targets clearly began to orient their actions towards the targets and away from the needs of their so-called clients, students, pupils, patients, and began to treat those clients in a box-ticking way that made them clearly secondary to the pursuit of those targets. The outcome of the 2010 inquiry into the Mid-Staffordshire hospital scandal revealed that, quote, the needs of often elderly patients were systematically neglected as the trust focused on winning foundation status, end quote, clearly shows that this is a stark reminder of the collateral damage that can occur from the traditional policy approach. Even the new coalition government seemed to recognize the problems of the traditional approach, and we're trying to find a way to move away from it. In the beginning, driven by a desire to differentiate themselves from labor and to push some of the pain of the austerity cuts away. They talked about a bonfire of the targets and a move towards greater local autonomy. These were clearly linked into the concept of the big society. However, as Michael Gove in Education talks about the re-centralization of all funding of education structures, and as Andrew Longsley in Health talks about the elimination of all local policy actors in health, things like the strategic health authorities and the primary care trusts, it's hard to see how the coalition is truly intending to move away from what was the traditional centralizing, top-down, command and control approach. If this is so, then we have to ask ourselves, why is it that UK policymakers refuse to move beyond this traditional approach? And if so, what can be done about it? And how can we move towards a more balanced approach that recognizes the importance of order, but also the importance of complexity and even disorder? I believe that to move forward from the orderly framework, we have to use a complexity perspective to completely reevaluate our beliefs in that area. This complexity framework offers new strategies and tools to move forward, and it enables us to reevaluate the existing strengths and weaknesses, and there are strengths to the traditional orderly perspective. Once we have done this, we can move forward and actually do more with less. It's important to note there are already a number of approaches that are similar to complexity that are being used in public policy making. For example, in the 2005 NHS Modernization Agency report, Working in Systems, they were emphasizing that the NHS should be viewed as a large system within system and that actors should approach the strategy in a similar way. In the 2010 UK Monroe Review of Child Protection, they emphasized that a systematic and systems-based approach should be used to understand the complicated area of child protection, and that this should be used to avoid the overly structured approach of the traditional policy making. Finally, not only in the UK but outside, for the Australian government, looking at what was called the Australian Public Service Commission, published in 2007, the Tackling Wicked Problems document, which looked at tackling what were called fuzzy or wicked problems. Complexity has significant overlaps with these approaches, and all of them are complementary rather than contradictory. In any case, complexity itself, what is absolutely essential about it, is that it offers a fundamental approach, a fundamental new way of looking at the world that does have a scientific foundation and builds on concepts from nature that can also be applied to policy. Moreover, complexity emphasizes the range of strategies necessary to deal with situations rather than a hierarchy of strategies. From our orderly-based perspective, the strategies used to deal with any situation, the best possible, is evidence-based strategy. From complexity, the idea is that a whole range of strategies are possible depending on the nature of the situation. If it's a complex situation, complex tools and strategies should be used. If it's an orderly one, evidence-based policymaking is the best. The key implication is that it's the range that's important and recognizing the necessary strategies. Finally, before we go on to explore complexity, it's important to remember one key fact, and that is complexity is fundamentally simple. And in fact, you are already an expert in it. Your life itself is composed of orderly, complex, and disorderly aspects. Orderly aspects include your eating, breathing, sleeping, highly predictable processes that continue throughout your life. It also includes complex processes, such as your social interaction, family interaction, nature of your work. All of those are very complex aspects, and these are often combined with disorderly aspects, unpredictable events, unforeseen circumstances, random emotional elements. All of these combine to make a normal human life that most people manage to go through relatively reasonably, never perfectly, but relatively well. All I am suggesting is that we apply these tools, concepts, and principles to the policy world.